the only way to start your day.
Bishop James Bogwa is a leadership consultant, and he's here this morning, and he joins us today in of James Wanyande, who is a director of investigations and compliance at the NCIC. Both of them here this morning. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here this morning and talking about sticky things, because we've come out of a season where folks have spoken unbridled, and we're getting into seasons where we're likely to see a lot more of that happen. And the question is just how much can we curtail? But before we get into that, Dennis is going to share today's proverb. We'd love to get your interpretation of it.
Yeah, so our proverb today comes from the country Sao Tome and Principe. And it is an island country located in the Gulf of Guinea off the west coast of Central Africa near Equatorial Guinea and Gabon. And the proverb that we get from this country today is soft water on hard stone hits until it pierces. Soft water on hard stone hits until it pierces. How would you interpret that, Bishop?
Soft water on
hard stone.
On hard stone.
Hits until it pierces.
It talks about the power of persistence.
Mm-hmm.
That if you are weak and not that strong, but you persist on doing something, ultimately you'll be able to achieve what you desire to do. Persistence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
James?
Yeah, I agree with Bishop here.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be consistent at certain actions. If you consistently do something, regardless of whether even if it's soft water,
mm-hmm.
then it has an impact in whatever it is that it's trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
So consistency in action will definitely result into something.
Something, yeah, well put. Consistency. I mean, it's just believing that at the end of the day, there is that light at the end of the tunnel, even when you don't see it.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I guess even when you do a good thing, even when that's for a good thing, we probably see the same also then for a negative thing. And that perhaps could form the basis for what we speak of this morning. Mm-hmm. That if you consistently use words in a negative manner, or you consistently speak in a certain way, you will get people to start to believe the things that you say, and they inadvertently will act on those things. It may be extreme, but we'll give the example of the genocide that happened in Rwanda, and that a lot of the killing took place on the mention of words from people who were supposed to be influential in society. But we saw that, whether it was on radio, whether it was people standing in a baraza, and that hundreds of thousands of people were killed at the mention of a particular element of hate. Just speech. They didn't have to do it, but other people did it on their behalf. We have seen recently words like that having been spoken. We have seen and we have heard, especially from the political arena, things that have been said. The NCIC was established for many reasons. To curtail one of these, to curtail this was one of the reasons why it was set up. So maybe we can start with you, James. I was going to say James. Both of you are James, but not the bishop. James, the investigator. When we see the things that we see in public having happened, and we know the things that have been said in public before, but all that happens is that folks get a slap on the wrist, and it doesn't happen, nothing is done beyond that. Can we really say that we are trying to avert hate speech or hateful action when we see these things continue in public?
Thank you for the question, Ndu. As a commission, we're a creature of statute. We're created by the National Cohesion Integration Act, and that therefore gives us the powers to act or not act. So one of the requirements of the NCI Act is to carry out what is known as conciliation.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is after we carry out investigations and we establish that perhaps the law has been broken, before we take somebody to court,
mm-hmm.
we are mandated by the law to do conciliation, which is basically an alternative dispute resolution. That is why a lot of times we say people are getting a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
But it's a requirement of the law. Yeah. So when perhaps when a politician or a perpetrator then does not carry out conciliation,
mm-hmm.
then is when we will take the matter to court. But most times, the first cause of action that we're mandated to undertake by the law is to carry out conciliation. So the public might feel that it's a slap on the wrist or just an apology, but it's a requirement of the law. Quite a number of times, as a commission, we have taken people to court through the ODPP. And once we have, for example, a politician in court, they will then say, I have not gone through this process of conciliation. And the court then sends us back to carry out conciliation. And you'll realize that is, a loss of public funds, because investigations take quite a bit of funds. So you go out to the field, look for witnesses. You're spending money carrying out.
Why does conciliation have to take place?
It's a requirement of the law. The Act, the NCIC Act, mandates us that before you take somebody to court, you shall ensure that you carry out conciliation. It's a requirement. So if I don't do conciliation and then I take you to court, you will raise an objection to the charges and say, I did not go through conciliation. And quite a number of times the court has sent them back to us and says, carry out conciliation first before you bring them to court.
Okay, maybe we'll come back in a bit to actually then what conciliation means, and then for real what it means, and then how it's carried out. But Bishop, what I'm hearing and what we've tended to see is that then folks can get away with murder, literally. Can say whatever they want, can do whatever they want, and they know that, okay, I'm going to have to go through conciliation. And then, if there's no threshold for proof, then, you can get away with whatever you want. We've heard some incendiary things being said in the last few months. And if anybody were to pick that up, we could actually get into very dangerous waters. Are we giving people carte blanche to then do whatever they say, whatever they want?
I think the law in providing for conciliation gave an opportunity to an offender to consider his ways, his or her ways, and change, and perhaps not be found offending one more time. But with that, I see a tendency, therefore, for people to, as you have said, to fall back to the same, because they know I have this alternative conflict resolution mechanism in place, which sometimes can be compromised. And I think my greater concern actually is, if people know that there is that leeway, would there not be like permission granted to people, therefore, to break the law and come back again and ask for forgiveness and be found doing the same? Together with that, I would like to ask our counsel here, conciliation is yes an alternative in trying to solve the issue. But then what measures are put in place so that others can learn from the mistakes of those that have gone the wrong way, so that they also don't think that they have a leeway and they can always break the law?
James, I have a question. I'm just trying to reconcile this. It's almost like there's how you have a recipe, and earlier we were talking about a recipe of baking a cake, and it was giving us that recipe, and we're talking about a totally different conversation. But just borrowing from that, you are following these steps, and you're saying when you go to court, then you'll be asked, okay, have you had these conversations before you bring this person to court? So explain how the whole process works. So you have this person making a statement, and from what Bishop is trying to find out, so this person makes a statement, then you investigate, you find this fault. But before you can take this person then to court, you have to sit them down, have a conversation. Bishop was talking about giving them an opportunity to change. I'm just curious, what happens when damage has been done? So let's say somebody made a statement, people have killed one another. So the law in this case forces you to, first of all, have a sit down with this person, have a conciliation before you can even go to court. But there's damage that has already been done. How does it work?
Yes, thank you, Dennis. I think it's important to note that, of course, where damage does take place, then conciliation probably would not be the most ideal situation, and each case is dealt in its own special circumstances. So definitely, where damage has taken place, then we would then say that conciliation would not be the best course of action. But it's also important to note that the fight against hate speech is not just a matter of the National Cohesion and Integration Commission. NCIC is just an investigative body. And like any other criminal justice system, there is the ODPP. Therefore, once we do carry out investigations, and as in our opinion, a law has been contravened, then we forward the file to the ODPP to then advise on whether they will carry out prosecution or not. And in a lot of instances, then the ODPP says, this matter is best settled via conciliation, for example, or this matter can then, proceed to court. So a lot of times we do receive a lot of flack, and I'm not trying to pass the buck, but there are a number of bodies who are involved in the fight against hate speech, including the ODPP. So a lot of times we do forward files to the ODPP. Sometimes it takes a lot of time for them to get back to us, and you realize that some of these crimes, like hate speech, if you don't act on it immediately, then the damage is done, or public lose confidence in institutions, and therefore we all have to play our part. If, for example, I forward a file to you and you take 5 months to respond to me, the public might not be aware of what's happening in the background. The public just knows, so and so said this. NCIC claimed that they're investigating. It's now been 5 months. This politician has gotten away with it. But you see, it's at the back. I forwarded my file to ODPP. He's must do his processes, 5 months, sometimes 6 months before they get back to us and say, okay, this one you need to do further investigations, or you need to conciliate.
Okay.
So unfortunately, the public is then hitting out at us and saying, you're toothless, you're not doing your mandate.
James, doesn't that then, if you've done investigations, you forwarded it to the DPP to act, and it takes however long it takes, and you see what one would call the perpetrator walk away, doesn't that then give ammunition to those who we continue seeing doing the same thing over and over again? Because perhaps they say, what I do.
Exactly. So there's that aspect of ammunition. But at the same time, if we're able to do conciliation, if you're able to extract an apology from this person as early as possible, then potentially some damage has been reduced. If I come forward and I'm remorseful about the utterances I made, then there's a win, so to speak.
How can you tell if somebody is remorseful over utterances that they made?
If they're genuine.
That's a challenge, but it's the win that we have to take. Of course, some people will take advantage of it and just say, I'll just come forward and apologize. But sometimes we make it a bit punitive in terms of the way you apologize. We had an instance a few years ago of one of the former ministers, Chirao Ali Makwere, who we took through a process of conciliation. And part of the requirements, we had to publish an apology in the newspaper, which cost some money. He had to organize peace rallies because he had made utterances publicly. So we told him that for us to conciliate this matter, then you must, in the same manner that you uttered these words, then you must apologize. So organize a peace rally and do an apology. So you might not be remorseful, but we'll try and make it a bit, you pay some money.
I want to come to the aspects of remorse with Bishop in just a bit, but I also want to look at some of these cases because they're public. The Member of Parliament for Kapseret, also Skudi, in 2019 was summoned by the NCIC over statements made on the 30th of March at Cheptiret in Wasingishu, referring to a certain community. In 2025, this was 6 years later, the NCIC announced investigations had concluded against him along with others, and their files were forwarded to the DCI for possible arrest and prosecution. That's one. Dan Wanyama, MP, Webuyen West, 2025, the NCIC identified him among 10 politicians whose investigations of hate speech or incitement had been completed and forwarded for prosecution. Peter Salasia, MP, Mumias East, he is said to have been charged with hate speech on the 19th of May 2025, accused of making inflammatory remarks on social media targeting specific ethnic communities under the National Cohesion and Integration Act. On October 9th, the court referred the case back to NCIC for review and recommendation before it proceeds to a full hearing. In March 2025, NCIC revealed Gachagua, former deputy president, was among 6 individuals summoned since January for alleged hate speech and ethnic contempt. He had reportedly ignored a summons. and it goes on and on. But they seem to be dead in the water.
Not necessarily dead in the water. It might seem that way to the public, but there's definitely action that's going on in the background. Now, summons is just one of the tools of investigation, and summons usually is an opportunity for the accused person to come and explain themselves, what they meant when they uttered those words, and potentially even to offer an apology. So summons is just one of the tools used as an investigation. So even if you ignore our summons, that doesn't mean that the matter has ended there. Investigations are still going on. So a lot of these cases are active investigations. For example, the Gachagua matter. Peter Salah said the matter is active in court, so I may not be able to make much comment on it.
Sure.
But Oscar Sudi, for example, I think that there could be a confusion in that, but there are a number of Oscar Sudi cases.
So I thought you were going to say there's a number of Oscar Sudis.
No.
But okay,
But I believe he was actually acquitted by the court in Nakuru for his utterances.
In a particular case.
In the case that I think the 2019 case.
Okay.
2025, we don't have a hate speech case against Honorable Oscar Sudi at the moment. But I don't want to mention some of them because they are active investigations.
Understood.
Yes.
So, Bishop, when we speak about leadership and we speak about those who seek positions of leadership, obviously the NCIC Act was put in place to curtail certain kinds of behavior.
Yes.
Do we expect that somebody who is going to be in a position of leadership then should be above reproach, that you should be able to comport yourself in a particular manner?
That's the ideal situation. Anyone who presents himself or herself for an elective position should be someone of repute, credible, one who would, my definition of a leader is someone who is the best example and model of what we all need to become. But oftentimes, leadership and politics gets mixed together. Politics is the fight for who has the power and the control. But then leadership is the reason why perhaps we fight for the power. If, for example, I'm vying for a seat and then I finally get elected, I sit in that place as a leader to execute, the mandate given to me by the people. But the fight for the control of power, I think, is what leads into some of these, hate speech, because verbal utterances have now become like a weapon that is used to demean others and to show that people should have less confidence or trust in another. So I believe that hate speech is not part of leadership. I think a leader should be able to articulate his view about things, his policy concerning different matters, and above all else, using words to build. I think words are given to build. Words should not be used to destroy or kill. Words should be used to build. It's a God-given means of communication, mobilizing people, rallying people behind a vision for common good, as opposed to what we're seeing, where words are used to destroy others.
Bishop, are you concerned that hate speech, if you look at it, especially in our country today, you find that it's being perpetrated by those in leadership? A regular Kenyan on the street does not really care who you are. But it only becomes a point of concern once you find a leader spews what it is they say and incite communities. Is it a concern?
I would say it's everyone, actually. This thing can catch up with everyone. But of course, leaders, because of visibility, we tend to, and of course their field of operation, leading, they are presiding over huge, groups of people, we tend to take note of what they're saying. And again, they comment usually on matters of national importance. They comment on matters that have to do with other leaders. But I also think the main reason why leaders feel like they can get away with it is because of the power itself. Some of them are actually so cushioned by the very position that they have in the society. Others have money. If you take them to court, then they will pay their way out. But the common one, there know that if they say anything against anyone, they have no defense, and most of the time the law seems to therefore be a little oppressing the weaker, because the stronger have a way of going around some of these things, and it's unfortunate.
James,
Specify which
James
one.
the First.
James the First. I'll call you Bishop.
Bishop, yes.
I just want to know, the other day we had a conversation around, and it was a country's conversation, where we're looking at corruption. And a lot of the governors and politicians who were then engaged in corrupt activities and investigations. And in Parliament, there is the agency, ESCC, it was called. And let's talk about the files. What's going on with all these cases? And they ended up saying, look, we're doing our job, but here's the weakest link. You earlier said you don't want to pass the buck to somebody else, but you're just one arm. You're investigating, but then after you've done your investigations, because you don't have prosecutorial powers, then you have to hand over the files to another agency. So we've created this several agencies around the justice system where they're interlinked. In your opinion, because you've said this may not necessarily be in the public domain, but there are a lot of other cases, there are so many cases that others you said you don't want to talk about, that behind the scenes are being worked on. But publicly, we may feel, okay, this guy, this is a toothless bulldog, there's nothing going on. That's the assumption. In your opinion, because you've said, fine, you'll get your files done, you'll process and you'll pass over these files to ODPP. In the grand scheme of things, as you're looking at all this, from looking at the past and the history from where you're coming from, what is the weakest link?
As I said, I didn't want to pass or cast aspersions on anybody, but we all have our role to play. So in as much as we'll investigate our files and forward to the ODPP, if the ODPP feels that we did not do a good job, then they send the file back to us. So in that instance, then perhaps NCIC hasn't done, its full role. It hasn't investigated the file to the best of its ability. Yeah. But when there's inordinate delay, if I send you a file and it takes 6 months, yes, you may have internal processes that you're doing, but as I said, the public is looking at us and wondering what's going on. You're not doing anything, but there's something happened. Yeah. So sometimes 6 months, 5 months is a bit too long to review a file that's of national interest, of public interest.
Kenyans move very fast.
So if you wouldn't take that period of time to review a file that's of national interest, then we do get blamed, and then we do look like the weakest link. And we don't want to get into a mudslinging contest with other agencies that we work with, every day saying that the ODPP is letting us down, or DACI is letting us down, or this other institution is letting us down. So we will not, do that publicly. But on the, behind the scenes, we do try to get our leadership to have meetings regularly to try and iron out some of these challenges. One of the ways that we're trying to go about this is to have a multi-agency, where we meet all these agencies meet together, the ODPP, DCI, NCIC, so that we don't hopefully get this back and forth. Yeah, so we sit down together, discuss a particular file, and we agree this is the way forward to move on this particular file. So in as much as there are challenges, there are ways that we're trying to resolve these challenges. Yeah,
so James, one would ask the question, if you've done your investigations, you feel you have a strong case against an individual or on statements that were made, do you believe that if policy change happens and you're given prosecutorial powers to handle your own matters, there would be some semblance of success? Or do you believe you should be given an opportunity to prosecute your own matter, because you are the one who's gone to the field, you have investigated it, you have the evidence, and feel strong enough that you can prosecute it? If you're given that opportunity, would that be better?
Yes, Dennis, I think there's a reason why the ODPP exists. I think before the advent of this new constitution, the police actually had the prosecutorial powers. They would investigate cases and then prosecute them themselves. But there's a reason why Kenyans decided to have an independent office, the ODPP, separation of powers. So, and as much as, yes, we would like to have prosecutorial powers, there's a reason, there's probably a greater good in having a different body checking us out. Because otherwise you could easily abuse the powers that you're given. Yes.
Do you feel, as an investigator who has combed through these things over and over again, do you think that the mandate of the NCIC then should be amended? Should the law be amended to allow certain things to happen? That's part one, and I can see you smiling. That's part one of the question. And then, I guess an addendum to that is that because laws are amended all the time. We just came off of 8 of them being amended last week to then be able to tweak things to happen in a certain fashion. But here we are, over the last 10 years, things have been said, people have acted based on those things that have been said, and we're still basically twiddling our thumbs saying, well, you know, if the ODPP decides that it's serious enough, then perhaps we can do something about it. But people still harbor those thoughts in their minds. Do you think it's time for an amendment of this act?
We have been trying to amend our act probably for the past, I would say, 10 years. But it's important to note that a lot of our clients are the people who amend the law.
Okay, we're getting somewhere here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I'm going to seek more powers as a commission, I'm going to approach Parliament and ask them, you know, to amend my law to give me more powers.
And it's interesting, of the cases that I mentioned, 4 out of 4 of them are members of Parliament.
That's the thing.
Okay.
So now, I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot. I'm not going to give you ammunition to hang me. So in as much as we've been trying to amend our law to give us more powers, not necessarily prosecutorial powers, but for example, the power to vet politicians before standing for elections. You know, if such powers are given to the NCIC, then there definitely would be an impact in hate speech. But as I said, a lot of our clients are the legislators, and so they would not want to shoot themselves in the foot.
Bishop, are we serious?
I'm listening and kind of thinking through all this, because I'm looking at the name NCIC, National Cohesion and Integration Commission. It sounds like therefore this commission, which is a statutory commission, is not supposed to be very aggressive in terms of prosecution, because it's national cohesion and integration. And I think that's why that clause about conciliation maybe is seen as a major way of dealing with the offenders. But that being the case then, as James has said, even as NCIC was to be given more power, and that would require that therefore the legislature sits down and of course formulate the law, and finally the executive has to sign and agree. And the people that perhaps are the greatest offenders are actually the very people would have to go back to. So does that maybe mean that we need to call someone else maybe to accountability, maybe not NCIC, or maybe together with NCIC, might we need to call someone else to accountability? Why is, for example, a file taking so long before people are prosecuted? Because I guess the punishment of one will become a lesson to the many. But until we see someone really suffering for their hate speech, we will still keep speaking, in a manner like this, suggests that we don't respect the freedom of others, even though we have the freedom of speech and expression. But that does not mean we should infringe into other people's rights and freedoms. Just a question.
Okay. Now, let's look at some of the things that happened in other places where hate speech was used as a tool of war. The radio broadcast in Rwanda, the infamous Radio Télévision Libre de Mille Collines broadcasted hate propaganda daily, every day. Remember the water? What is the proverb? Every day, the water in the thing, it will eventually get you what you're going.
Yes. Soft water.
It used jokes, songs, and talk shows to dehumanize Tutsis, calling them Inyenzi, which was cockroaches or enemies of the state. The announcers gave names and addresses of Tutsis, encouraging listeners to find them and kill them. We already know that later this exact thing happened because somebody was being fueled to pay them. This exact thing happened. The 10 Hutu commandments of 1990 encouraged Hutus not to marry, do business with, or trust Tutsis. Extremist politicians labeled Tutsis as foreign invaders or traitors, portraying genocide as self-defense. It went on and on and on, but it was a daily thing. Every time they got an opportunity, politicians would speak about this thing, and people actually took what they said as gospel truth and actually went ahead and did it. That's the seriousness that we're talking about this thing. We can sit here and we can say that, oh, well, somebody may say something at a rally, but doesn't really have that much impact. It does. We still remember till today when somebody said, Ukiwaona weka. We remember it till today, because the impact that it had as a result of that. Till today, guess what? In conflicts, people still take the tire and they put it and they burn it, don't they?
They do.
So what is our response then to the very glaring possibility of the impact of some of these words that are used? Can we handle it with kiddie fingers, with kiddie gloves? Or must we fight fire with fire, really?
Yes, the media definitely has a role to play. You've highlighted the issues in Rwanda, and even locally, we had one media personality who was charged with crimes against humanity at The Hague after the 2007-2008 post-election violence in Kenya. One of the journalists did get that charged. So as a response, the Commission has done a number of things. Now, first, we developed media guidelines for hate speech. Basically to train journalists on how to identify what potentially could be hate speech and not to broadcast that. We have undertaken a lot of trainings of the police force. You realize that hate speech is a new crime. The NCIC Act was passed 2008. And therefore, a lot of the police who get trained in Kiganjo might not get this kind of training. So as an NCIC, we've developed a training manual to train the police on the identification and investigation of hate speech. We're currently developing guidelines to prevent dissemination of misinformation and disinformation online. So as we're able to train general public on how to identify what is misinformation and disinformation online, because that definitely could have an impact on spreading hate speech. So it's not exactly kiddie gloves. If the prosecution bit of it is not working, then there are other measures that we're trying to institute as a commission. But also important to note that the commission does not just work on hate speech. We have a very wide mandate: issues of ethnicity within the country, issues of equal distribution of resources. So there are other things that as a commission that we do that would have an impact on issues of cohesion and inclusion within the country, not just on hate speech. Yes, thank you.
Bishop, I have a question based on what James has just said in terms of the mandate, and by extension, it's not just covering hate speech. Are we dealing with a deeper problem? And maybe we're throwing dirt at the commission, and we go to its formation. And you know how they say in church, the foundation is very important. And the reason why NCIC was created to begin with was in response to what we saw, 2007, 2008. That's the post-election violence, where people died, a lot more injured. And this was as a result of the disputed presidential election. So let's start there. That was the reason why NCIC was actually formed. Now, when we look at the violence, what then it exposed? It exposed ethnic divisions. It exposed hate speech that we just talked about, and political intolerance. Those are the three key things. Then the commission was formed. But are we trying to address an issue here that a commission may not necessarily be able to deal with? Because years later, this is 2007, 2008, we're in 2025. And from where I sit, we are still so polarized along ethnic lines. And we've had a lot of, and this has extended. The other day, but this was, I think, was it during Sabasaba or was it last year? I'm trying to remember, where we had a politician who was saying he's going to marshal all the warriors and the young men
in his community,
to all come in buses to Nairobi with pangas and rungus. He never necessarily mentioned a tribe, but he was talking about the Gen Z protest. Tutaenda hao, tutapambana nao, na hizo masimu zao, those kind of things. But this is galvanizing warriors from his own community, and it's not necessarily ethnic, but is creating an army around the community to go and attack a group of people.
We even had another one who said he would kill 5,000 young people.
Exactly, we had that. So we are seeing politicians being very clever, and this thing is morphing. It's not necessarily pointing at a particular tribe. is a particular group of people.
Yeah.
It could be human rights activists, for example. It could be the Gen Z who are tribeless and all that. What exactly are we dealing with here? And can NCIC then, with all its mandates and all these things that you're talking about, really deal with the core issues of Kenya? Because from 2007 to 2008, look at what happened and the lessons. And we talked about Rwanda. Andon has given an example of what happened in Rwanda. And back then, we kept saying that we can't go the Rwanda way. And then later on, the politicians who are saying, maybe actually we need to go the Rwanda way so that we can learn our lessons, never to go back to talking about tribe. Where is the soul of this country in this conversation?
I believe that NCIC alone cannot, kill this giant. I'll take us back to that 2007, 2008. What were we fighting for? Fighting for power, fighting for resources, fighting for our ethnic identity and whatever goes with it. And of course, when one group of people in Kenya felt that they were denied, they went to the streets, they picked their weapons and killed other Kenyans. And the other group of Kenyans also retaliated, and we had over 1,000, close to 1,000 people, lost their lives, and hundreds of thousands were displaced. The displacement to me is loss of property. But the fight was instigated by really the fight for, the war was instigated by the fight for power. And so what is this that makes each one of us feel like I need a little bit more of power, a little bit more of wealth, and people are willing to kill for that, even using words? What is this? I believe there's a deep-seated deficiency in all of us as a nation, and I would attribute this to our national ethos. What have we been taught? What do we believe as Kenyans is the whole purpose, of living? I remember as a small, boy growing up, before I was 7 years, I already knew there are certain people in this country that my people have nothing to do with. I was taught to call them names, and I was told if you come near any of them, you should not even befriend them. I was told...
Don't even marry them.
Yeah. I was actually warned because my people knew I was going to go to a national school because of my primary school performance. Said you can't fill schools in a certain part of the country because if you end up there, they hate you as much. And so they might, mess up with you. So we have not seen our nationhood as a value, as something precious to embrace and to actually fight for. We have tended to see our tribal and very personal, partisan sort of benefits as the most important thing. And to me, that therefore means the soul of our nation is sick. Because as long as we are that selfish, we end up being like, Cain, who killed his brother because God accepted his brother's sacrifice and rejected his. And if God accepts your brother's sacrifice, he's your brother. You should rejoice because at least God will be visiting your family when he's coming to see your brother. But to kill your brother, when Cain killed Abel, that does not mean his sacrifice was accepted, and that did not even mean he stood a chance. He did not become the replacement, of Cain. Adam and Eve together another child. I think the name is Seth. Out of Seth came another one called Enosh, and it continues. So I believe that is the soul of our nation, and the 50+ million Kenyans, each one of us, leaders, the led, everyone, we need an adjustment of our national ethos. And that's, I think, a major discussion. It came around at one point in the course of our political development, but politics played out, we didn't get that chance to have a discussion as recently as maybe 3 years ago on what do we need to adjust in our national ethos and our thinking as a nation.
And yet, with this sick soul in Kenya, NCIC is expected to heal and to fix the sickness that you've just talked about.
And don't forget that the NCIC commissioners, they themselves come from certain people groups, and you might be expected to do some certain favors to people from your place, just because that's the way we think as a nation. We value our tribal inclinations more than we value our nationhood, the 44 plus, nation tribes.
When you talk about the soul of the nation, I was born and raised in Eldoret, yeah? So everybody that I grew up with were people from that region, Originally, I'm from Migori County. My friends, schools I went to, I speak a little bit of Kalenjin. And if you ask me today about Migori, I know more of Eldoret than Migori. If I'm traveling at night, nitapotea Migori, because I don't know anything about Migori, but I know everything about Eldoret. And up until 2007, post-election violence, because I remember when that happened, when fire was around the city, I could see that happen. But that never took away my friends and people I grew up with. But what I remember is the hate that was being pushed by the leadership and the political class at the moment. That I remember. And as we talk about that now, later NCIC is formed, and the basic questions that everyone is asking is, what is the conviction rate for NCIC for us to say a lot is being pushed? Because Kenyans are saying, fine, NCIC is there, but we're not seeing any results. So perhaps if you could just clear the air. What's the conviction rate in terms of this is what we've achieved thus far, and in the future, say, in the next 2 years, this is what we intend to do to ensure that if it slows, we've given proposals to fix the policy for us to be able to do more.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. As I mentioned, we are more than just a hate speech commission. So in as much as citizens want to see a conviction rate, that's not the only work that we do. But there have been a number of convictions. I think maybe 3 or 4 people have been convicted of hate speech. But as I mentioned earlier, there's more that we do. We carry out ethnic audits of public institutions, so to establish what your workforce is made up of. Because the law states that not more than 1/3 of staff on a public establishment should come from one ethnic group. So as a commission, we carry out audits of parastatals, commissions, universities, and I believe in the next few weeks we're going to release a report on that. Before the last elections, we had a project called the Elections Bill and Norma, and it had different pillars that were geared towards ensuring that we have a peaceful election. So those are some of the strategies that we put in place to ensure cohesion. We've established what we call Amani clubs in a number of schools, primary schools, secondary schools. We carry out dialogue where ethnic communities are fighting in Sondu, in between the borders of Kakamega and Nandi. We bring communities together and have discussions about the challenges. So it's not just about hate speech. So if we're going to be measured, if the yardstick is conviction, then potentially we will always fail. But I'm saying we all have we have different other initiatives that we do as a commission, all geared towards bringing cohesion in the country.
Is it working? Can you, if you were to use your M&E mechanism, and say that if the attempt at cohesion or integration is something that we're looking for, how would you measure and then be able to say, actually, you know what, we've achieved a certain measure of integration or cohesion in the country as a result of these Amani clubs, for example? Because it seems an awful lot like even that could be happening at communities where people don't necessarily hate each other, right? People are intermarrying all the time. But for some reason, when somebody, and that's why I think perhaps this is why we insist on the hate speech kind of thing, because for some reason, all somebody's got to do is open his or her mouth, and people gravitate very quickly back to those communal cocoons and will then want to operate in that setting. So how has the integration and cohesion worked? Because one would assume if it has to a place whereby it's acceptable, it would not be so easy then to influence people's minds to reawaken the conversation.
I disagree with you on that because the past few weeks, I don't want to mention names, but there have been conversation, especially online, about an attempt to have certain ethnic groups fight. But once these utterances were made by these politicians, if you followed the conversation online, people say that we are not going to divide us along tribal lines. We are now immune to that. And those are part of the trainings that we do as an institution to ensure that the public are not easily manipulated. They realize what the dangers are of these utterances that are made by politicians, and therefore we become immune to them. So in as much as a politician or a political leader might come up on a podium and make utterances, that are geared towards dividing us along ethnic lines. I think the citizens are now more learned. They realize what the dangers of what these politicians are doing, and we therefore are resistant to that.
Is that the people who've just decided that they're going to say enough of this? And because that's where my question went, in terms of the initiatives for integration and cohesion that the NCIC, by the way, is definitely working on, or things that have been done, do they serve as deterrents? Do they ensure that this cohesion and integration is taking place? Or are people of the country just sick and tired of this nonsense and say, we're not doing this anymore, regardless of who comes to tell us? And that's why everybody was, I am Joroge, I am Duta. Yeah. Everybody did that because they're tired of this thing, and not necessarily because somebody sat them down in a room during a workshop and said, actually, guys, this is how we should operate.
I would, of course, say it's a combination of both. We definitely are, as a nation, fed up with being, trying to be divided along tribal lines, because, as you said, we're intermarrying. Dennis grew up in Eldoret. All his good friends were from Eldoret. He doesn't know much about Migori. I was brought up in Nairobi. All my friends are from different ethnic groups. Therefore, when a politician begins to try and divide us along ethnic lines, that doesn't make sense to a lot of people, to the Gen Zs who are, tribeless and all that. So there's an element of, yes, we're as a nation, we're now resisting this manipulation along ethnic lines. But of course, we have done some work as a commission towards eliminating issues of negative ethnicity.
Bishop, now let's look at it from the part of leadership and as a clergy now. In terms of dealing with where we find ourselves as a country in terms of divisive politics, ethnicity, hate speech, how concerning is it for you from a point of a leadership consultant and as a member of the cloth?
Like I mentioned earlier on, I believe that the soul of our nation needs treatment. As much as words have been used to divide us, what we're referring to as hate speech, but I also would like to say that words have been used to heal us and to bind us together and to bring us together. And we have a golden opportunity, first of all, from the church where I serve, to preach reconciliation, cohesion, peace, and love from our pulpits. It would be very unfortunate for any preacher, any church, anywhere to be tribal and to be issuing hate statement, etc., etc. It would be so unfortunate. Not that I have found one, but I do know, like in the case of Rwanda, church was part of. It was one of the factors that was one of the communities that was used to peddle hate in that nation that led to the loss of many lives. So I believe that we should use the power of words to build, not to destroy. So every leader should now include in their speeches, in their whatever they say, words that build us, that encourage us towards forgiveness and conciliation and working together. I think we all need to study the policies and study some of the statements that have been issued by NCIC and include them into our other speeches and communication, the nation. Definitely, there is need for what we call civic education on this matter. I don't think civic education is just about election. Most of the time, we just remember to do civic education when elections are around the corner. But such a matter would require a national drive, and we show our people the importance of being careful about what we say, illustrate to them the negative impact some negative words would have on people, and show them how to be better in building. Because this far, Kenya has been built through words. From the founding president to date, our current president, every time they have used words constructively, then the nation is built. But anytime someone uses words to destroy and demolish, definitely we have incurred, some losses.
Right. There's a lot of work that's got to be done, that's for sure. We're getting into, I think we're already in the throes of political silly season where a lot of this is going to happen. Good to know that there is a guard on all of this. But our time, unfortunately, at this point comes to an end. James Wanyande is the Director of Investigations and Compliance at the National Commission for Integration, Cohesion Commission, as well as Bishop James Bogwa, who is a leadership consultant. Thank you both for being here this morning. We continue these conversations at 8:08. Good morning.
It is now 8 a.m. with ICEA Lion.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Beyond the gleaming skyscrapers,